All right, welcome back to the Travi Wavi. Here we are another week in beautiful historic downtown Abilene, Texas, the storybook capital of Texas and America. And we are coming to you live today on this podcast with super producer Sam Wolf behind the controls. I'm your affable host, Travis Eason. And we're lucky today to have a really special, wonderful guest, another character in our community that we're happy to listen to and hear some of her stories. Donna Albus, thank you for being here today, Donna.
A lot of people do describe me as a character.
That's what I've heard from everyone so far that I've said, I'm going to get Donna Albus on the podcast. And they all say, oh, she's a character. You're going to love her. Well, we're really glad that you're here today. Can I open it up with a question that I'm starting to ask a lot of my guests? Do you have any siblings?
I do. There were 7 of us to start with. I had 3 brothers and 3 sisters.
And where do you fall in that line?
I am the 3rd of 7.
Okay.
Yes. I told my folks I wasn't the first boy and I wasn't the first girl, so I must be adopted. And so my father one day to, squelch those, I don't know if fears or statement, he said, do you honest to God think that we would have had you if we wouldn't have had to? So, I never worried again that I wasn't part of the stream.
That's great. And so of all your siblings, how many of y'all are still in Texas?
Well, we're all in Texas except 3 have passed now.
Okay.
I just recently lost an older brother.
I'm sorry.
And we had his memorial and buried his ashes at the farm that we still hold in an LLC in Knox County. And during that service, an interesting point came up, and I had never heard this story before. But when my sister died, she left behind a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, Holly and Ryan. And when they got to be young adults, Holly asked us all to write our memories about Velvet. And in Laval, who recently passed, in his memories, he had written a story that being the oldest of 7, the little kids were really getting on his nerves. And he's probably around 10, 12. And he decides he's going to run away from home.
Oh, no.
Yes, and so he gathers up his baseball hat and glove and his bag, and he's going down the road, and he turns and looks, and all of us kids are following behind him. So he turns around and goes back, and he says, if you're running away from what irritates you and bugs you, and they're going with you, you might as well go back home. Isn't that a wonderful story?
Great. I love that. That's great. So we were just discussing before we started recording today that we're neighbors, and we really haven't ever had a chance to meet until today.
Is that amazing?
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
We're both Northsiders.
I've lived in that house since 1970.
That's wonderful.
We moved from Yorktown over on the far west side of town. I moved to town in 68, and we moved to Anson Avenue in 1970.
That's wonderful. So you've seen the neighborhood through all of its ups and downs.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we're getting a little bit of a revitalization up there on the north side. It's kind of
Right.
fun and nice.
My boys all went to Ben Milam School, the little white schoolhouse up on the hill. It was a wonderful, wonderful school.
That's great. I would like to see a picture of that at some point. I've heard some other neighbors talk about that school, and wasn't it located just on the south side of the block?
Well, it's pretty much took up that whole piece of the block.
Yeah, where the Friendship House
community
is now.
house is now, and that space. Yeah,
I'm hoping to continue to see that part of the neighborhood developed. I know there's been so many different ideas and plans over the years, but I would like to see that developed at some point in the future.
Well, they're really cleaning up a lot of those places.
They
now,
really are. And we have the Healing Hands, I think that's what it's called, the Healing Hands buildings that are sort of behind you and more on Hickory with the affordable homes for people that are coming into town that have a loved one that are staying at Hendrick or something. They can stay there for an affordable price. I think that's a wonderful thing that the
Nice
neighborhood's
little
doing. Yep,
houses.
yep.
I've been taken through those to
They look good.
see.
Good.
Very, very nice.
Good, good. I'm glad that we're doing more. When I moved, so we moved into that house in 2000 the end of the year 2005, early 2006, and I was a little uncertain about being on the north side in that neighborhood with young children, and was it going to be safe, and these sorts of things. But right away met a lot of our immediate neighbors, and felt good about that, and just hearing the history. And then there was I'm not going to remember her name, but there was a woman at Hardin Simmons that came by and encouraged me to run for the neighborhood association, which was sort of active at that time. And we did a few things to try to just generate neighborliness, and working with the city on things, like the recycling center we used to have over there by the White Horses. And anyway, that was a fun way for me to plug in early on into community and service in the neighborhood. And I'm just glad to finally meet you, because you're like the local celebrity that's my neighbor. So I first heard about you. You were serving on city council. Can you share with me some of that politics time in your life?
It was an interesting time. I had just retired from the West Texas rehab, and was certainly not, in my thought process that I would even do this. And a group of women took me to lunch. Watch out when a group of women take you to lunch. And said that we need you to be on the council. You say you love Abilene. If you really love Abilene, you'll do this. And I'm like, haven't I done enough? And they said, yes, but we need you. And Abilene was starting to come into kind of a negative viewpoint about how to approach things. And we need to.
What do you mean by that? A negative approach to how to approach things, or negative
It was
attitude?
like we didn't want new growth. We didn't want, everything was negative. People looked at things, the glass was half empty, not full. And coming at it from that point of view, and then not having a solution of what to do about it. And so it was just seemed to be on a decline. And so they said, you've got to run, and if you sign up, you'll have no opponents, because who would run against you? Well, I had 2 opponents.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so, anyway, the campaigning was horrible. I had told other candidates that had run, Susan King for one, when she was running, I said, how come you haven't asked for my vote? And she said, oh, that's so hard to do. And I said, are you the best candidate for the job? And she said, well, I think I am. And I said, well, then I'd be asking me for my vote, because your opponent has. And I said, how come you haven't asked me for money? And she said, oh, that is really hard to do. And I said, are you the best candidate for the job? And she said, yes. And I said, then I'd be asking me for money. Now, I don't have a lot of money, but I know a lot of people that do. Well, that's real good advice when you're giving it to somebody else. But when you're faced with those 2 opportunities, I tell you, it is tough to ask somebody for their vote and then to ask them for money to support you. But we got through that, and so I kept saying, one and done. That was it. One term of 3 years, and I would have put in my time, would have turned the momentum around on council, and then we were faced with the hotel. And we had to come at that from a total different approach, because the county wouldn't play. And I was very upset over that. I said, we, the city, supported we, the county, with the $53 million project to bring you up to, being a good facility, a prime facility. And you, the county, won't support us, the city, in a tax abatement for 10 years on one property, just one property, not all the revitalization that's taken place since. And so we had to completely change our approach, and it then became part of the city's own property, so they'll never get any taxes out of it. So anyway, that wasn't finished. And after my term was up, and I had a couple of people that were going to run that took on that negative viewpoint. And I'm like, I can't leave this task unfinished. And so I signed up for another term. And people are like, I thought you said that you were going to only run once and you were done. I said, those damn politicians, you can't believe anything they say. So I ran again and had two opponents again. But we made it. We have the hotel. And I tell you, if we never rented a room in that hotel, it's already paid for itself with all the energy that it's brought to town, all the revitalization, both seasoned, as you said before, and the young citizens have all participated in investing in Abilene.
I would agree with that. We talk a lot about that on this podcast with some of my other guests about how the synergy, the energy, the revitalization, the people taking big risks and stumbling and failing to try to build new business or restaurant or boutique or whatever it is. And I have a friend in the audience today. One of the reasons that she was back in town was because of the hotel. She was one of the early minds that was there helping get that built. So I think the hotel has brought a lot of energy downtown, and I hope to see that continue. I know that we just both came from the city council meeting this morning, and there's discussion, a couple of interesting things. The Lancium project that's being built a little bit north of town, and you visited that complex.
Right.
And the discussion this morning was about additional, I think they called it a reinvestment zone.
Right.
To do some additional tax abatement for them in the future. What is your take on that project, and what's your feeling about it?
Well, the area where it was nothing but a gravel pit. So it was bringing minimal taxes to the county. It wasn't bringing anything to the city because it was outside the city limits. They came to the city and asked to be included in the city limits. And now it's my understanding that you have to ask before you can incorporate
Interesting.
more property into your city limits. Anyway, they wanted to be within the city limits so that they would have city services. And so at that point in time, an abatement was, it was a different setup at that time because it was going to be Bitcoin mining, which is something so far out of my knowledge reach. So now that it's turned into more of a generating power, energy, it's interesting. It's a lot of AI, which is scary and exciting all at the same time. Scary because if it's misused, it can really do major damage. If it's used properly, it can be very, have all sorts of opportunities and inventions and information that we've never had access to before.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm cautiously optimistic.
Well, that's good. I think I am too. It is a little nerve-wracking having Abilene be in the national spotlight with the Stargate discussion, and that this project is basically the first foothold potentially in the Stargate project with this Lancium data center development. And it was interesting for me today to watch City Council and some of the discussion about, you know, how do we move forward with additional abatements for the project. And I'm still kind of sorting out my own thoughts about it, my own opinions about it, but just to watch how industry and government partner together to try to push the boundaries forward. I mean, it does feel to me like we're moving forward at a faster pace than maybe we did 10 or 20 years ago as a society. And even though we don't know what the outcomes are going to be of this data center, or if it's going to be a positive use of energy, time, space, and manpower, we're still pushing forward. We're trying to find a way to. And this might sound a little inauspicious, but all I heard today was the money. It's all about the money, the tax revenues, and future tax revenues. And there's not a lot of thinking about. Well, you brought up water. That was one of your initial.
First thing that I was concerned about, and I went to the city manager and I said, okay, we're already asking our citizens to only water 2 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to bring in, this is back when it was Bitcoin mining, and they used major water to cool the computers as it ran through. And I said, what happens when we run out of water? And he said, well, it will circle back to Fort Phantom after it goes through the system. And I said, Robert, there's a certain thing called evaporation.
Mm-hmm.
And then another concern was the amount of electricity it would use. And I said, we've already asking our citizens to cut back, to cut up their thermostats during the summer, so not to use so much electricity. Oh, well, they're going to be using this electricity, and when it gets to a point that we need that electricity, they'll shut down their plant. And I'm like, right, okay. But now I understand they have built a whole different power plant out there, and they will be using solar as well as turbines, and as well as the electricity off the grid. And they're, as I'm told, are to be generating energy, and anything that they don't need will go on to the grid to help the city. So I think that will be a positive if that plays out. And the water, they say now this new project that they've got going on has a closed system water where it will keep recirculating instead of constantly drawing from Phantom. And that whenever it is put back into the system, it will be clean water, not compromised water.
Well, that's
so
good.
That is encouraging. So I just hope that it all plays out.
Yeah, me too.
And looking at it, having only 15% is better than no percent. And it's for 10 years, which I initially heard would be a 20-year abatement. And if it's a 10-year abatement, then we're looking at it like, okay, why should I be against it when I was criticizing the county for their outlook about the hotel when they wouldn't go along with a 10-year abatement on that?
Yeah.
And sometimes that is the enticement that you need to get somebody to come play ball with you. And so if you need that, and it's like Kyle brought up uh, about the insurance that,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we all have opportunity of the same getting a plan from the insurance company, and sometime we get a break
Yeah.
from one or the other
Yeah.
to get you to do business
Yep.
with them. Or, for that matter, there's all sorts of enticement, uh, TV networks or whatever. New customers, you
Mm-hmm.
get a
Mm-hmm.
break if you will come on and do business with me the first year. So,
Hmm.
you know, it is doing business.
It is doing business. And you've been a part of the business community for quite a long time also. You
Right.
you and your husband had Tom's?
Tom's Snack Foods,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we did. Uh, we moved to town, and we had a place, first of all, over next to the Winters Freeway,
Mm-hmm.
and then we moved it over. When we moved to the house we're in 1970, we had the warehouse was right beside our house. And so we had 8 different trucks that ran out to various parts of the county.
Hmm.
And we were a popular place for all the kids'
I
friends
bet.
at snack time.
I bet.
Let's just go over to the Tom's warehouse,
Yeah.
So, yes. So I've seen both sides
Mm-hmm.
of the retail market and the nonprofit
Mm-hmm.
market because I've played in both fields.
You've played a lot in both fields, and going on the nonprofit end, um, as a character in our community, you're also a caring character in our community because you've served. I don't even have the list in front of me. I read it again this morning. Abilene Preservation League, Beautify Texas,
Keep
Keep
Texas
Keep Texas
beautiful.
Beautiful. Oh, I'm gonna draw a blank, Donna. You list some more. I mean, you've just done everything.
Well, I've served on the Abilene Convention and
Visitors Bureau.
Visitors Bureau now for about 25 years because I so believe in bringing people to our city,
Mm-hmm.
bringing your money,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
seeing our city. People are always so amazed at Abilene, and really our biggest asset is our people.
I agree.
And we bring Leadership Texas, which is a group of women. This will be our 5th time to bring them to Abilene. And initially, when it starts out, they're all like, Abilene? Who is that? Where is that? But we roll out the red carpet. I've told people for years that when you have a convention other places, it's an event. When you have a convention in Abilene, it's a happening.
Yeah.
We love company,
Yeah.
and we do throw out the welcome mat. I just recently had 4 of my Keep Texas Beautiful friends come to visit because they wanted to see and stay in the new hotel.
Oh, good.
Because I'd been bragging
Yeah.
so about it. Came from Lake Jackson, Midland, Denton, San Saba. And so I took them around to see key places.
Mm-hmm.
And everywhere we went, not just the worker bees who were very, very friendly, but the managers of those places dropped everything they were doing and greeted and took them around and showed them firsthand what Abilene was all about. And one of my friends said, I have never been treated like that, ever. She said, my goodness, I felt like a celebrity. So that I said, well, that's just kind of the Abilene way, that people will drop their own project to help somebody else finish theirs, even if they're competitors.
Yep.
And nonprofits vying for the same dollar will support each other and let them have their fair share.
I had my guest last week was Jeff Bell from Pappy Slocum, and that was something that we discussed because there was a period of time when I worked for him part time, and the other breweries were starting. Sock Dolliger was starting. Primal was starting. It's a little before Green Theory's time, but even with Green Theory and Sunhouse and everyone else that has tried that business model, Jeff would go out of his way to help all of those other competitors without batting an eye. Drop everything. Oh, what do you need? You need grain? You need some help with equipment, or I can store that for you. It was just, and that's it, and then my background's in theater, and so in the theater world, we're all poor, and that's all we can do is help each other. Is all so
Right.
that is my background in that. But then to see it in the business community was really empowering to me to know that it's okay to care. You don't have to just care about the bottom line. It's okay to care about other people, even if they're your competitors.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do think that we march to that drum beat here in Abilene.
Well, after we sold our business in '86, I went to work for the Preservation League, and I was there during raising the money for the Grace. Years later, when we came up with the little buildings that reflected, the miniature buildings that reflected the buildings of our city, the first one was the Grace. And I gave one to each one of my boys. And on the bottom, I wrote, two of my life's greatest events was giving birth to you and rebirth to the Grace. And to have my name on the side of that building is pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And I tell everybody that's my tombstone. You better make certain that building stays standing because I'm giving my body away to science. So I will not have a tombstone per se,
Yeah.
except for the Grace. And it's got my name on that building. So
Well, you did a lot with that, and I want to stay on that subject. You talk about in some of the publications that are about you that we're a railroad town, and that's something that I like to talk about too on this channel. Is recognizing that the only reason that Abilene exists is because of the railroad.
right. And it wasn't supposed to be here.
No,
It
Buffalo
was
Gap,
supposed to
right?
be in Buffalo
Yeah.
Gap. Why, it was a booming metropolis of 1,200 people at that time. And everybody thought it would go through there. Well, they just made a mistake because they didn't deal with the Simpson twins. And also, the Kentucky newspaperman had land holdings in this area. Now, some may call that insider trading
I
these
might think so.
days. But anyway, J. Stoddard Johnson was the one that was really promoting where the railroad should go. And so I think he cut a deal with the Simpson twins, and that's how it came to milepost 407,
Interesting.
which was our only identifier at the time. It was on a telegraph wire from, goodness, all of a sudden I'm showing my age here, Marshall to, where did we go? Anyway, that was milepost 407.
Milepost 407.
Uh-huh.
Someone needs to start a cafeteria or a dive bar and call it Milepost 407.
Okay.
That's a good one. Yeah, it's so something we've talked about before is when when Abilene was created, the railroad came through, and we had the different train depots and stations built to satisfy the goods and the people that were coming to and from this area, but mostly coming here because there wasn't really anything here. And this wasn't that long ago, 150 years ago,
Right.
give or take. And when I moved here in the summer of 2001, right away it's hard not to notice the railroad tracks that run right through town because we start the north streets on the north side of the railroad tracks and the south streets on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Railroad tracks run right through the middle of the town, and the train doesn't stop anymore.
Right.
It's just goods now. There's no services or people getting off the train anymore. And so how does a town like Abilene find its way when the birthing carrier has left? And I think you've been a part of helping Abilene find her way.
Well, it's some more of that people helping people. And I think it started from the very get-go when a young couple was getting married and everybody was trying to get their homes built and settled in. And they all put their own homes on the back burner while they built the home for the young bride so she'd have a place to get married. And that kind of attitude has just stayed. And when you lose something like the passenger railroad, you pick up something else and you help somebody else create a business that will sustain your town. It's just a wonderful place to be and a wonderful place to raise a family. I describe us as a bunch of little towns underneath one umbrella because we really do have small town attitude. And believe me, I know small town because I grew up in Knox City, and that is a big metropolis of, I think it was about 1,200 when I was growing up. And it's, you know, when you're in school, you play everything, every sport, because you needed everybody to participate in everything to have a team. And so Abilene has that kind of attitude. And I think we really saw it a lot during COVID.
I agree.
How we all pitched in together. You know, George Levesque over at the Paramount to make his budget selling popcorn and having people lined up clear around the block to go by and buy popcorn. Whether you needed popcorn or not, you went and bought popcorn. And in fact, the Paramount is one of the very first places I ever volunteered.
Oh, really?
After I first came to town, I would go on Friday, Saturday night and sell tickets or take up tickets, whatever was needed, because we were a total volunteer group.
I love that.
And it was part of the Preservation League, and then it split off from the Preservation League and became its own entity. And so continued working for both of them, Preservation League as a volunteer and the Paramount as a volunteer. So
And then, but you led the Preservation League for a period of time.
I did. I was there from, let me see, 86 to 91. And after we raised the brick and mortar money to sustain the Grace, which that was a whole nother bailiwick. When we'd go out, Frank Murray and I, and people don't know the name Frank Murray, and they need to know the name Frank Murray, because the Grace would not be there today had it not been for Frank. It was his dream, his passion. I tell everybody, he was the Pied Piper and we were his mice. And he sang the song and we danced. But it took so many phases to become the building that it is today, and to be able to house the three museums of Abilene. Frank pushed and pushed and went over and convinced the museums that had a 5,000 square foot building to move into that 55,000 square foot building. You really can do it. And initially, the Preservation League was going to be in part of the building and the museum in part. And Meadows Foundation said, it won't work. You can't do that. And so that's when the Preservation League said, well, we'll step away and let the museums have it after we raise the brick and mortar money. So Frank and I would go out, because I was his assistant, and we'd go out and we'd talk to the different people about why they should invest in the museum, donate their hard-earned money. And he would take one role and I'd take the other, and the next people we'd go talk to, we'd just flip, just
Good cop, bad cop.
just for sheer fun. he was really passionate,
Mm.
and he pushed and he pushed and he pushed and drug the rest of us along. And I just am so sad that people do not recognize the role he played. The only reason that building is still standing is it was going to cost $100,000 to tear it down and make a parking lot
Mm.
for the Abilene Reporter News.
Mm.
The ironic thing of it all is that all these years later, it cost $400,000 to tear down the Abilene
Reporter
Reporter News
News.
to make a parking lot
And there it is.
for
There's
the
our parking
town.
lot right there. Yep. That's fun. So I mean, I've been in Abilene now for since 2001, so creeping up on 25 years. But when I moved here, a lot of these historical preservation projects had already been completed, like the Grace, um, and many others. But over the last 10 or 15 years, we've seen almost like a new push in downtown redevelopment. Like we just mentioned, the Reporter News is no longer there. It's a parking lot. And um, today at the city council meeting, talking about taking another building downtown that is basically a vacant office building and converting that into apartments and maybe some low income housing. If you got to wave a wand, Donna, and make changes towards a vision that you see for Abilene, what are some things that you would really like to see happen in downtown or overall for our community?
Well, I just know that we've got to give value. While we need new and uh, new building, new business, we've still got to value
Mm.
our history.
Mm-hmm.
And by preserving those buildings, Cypress Street
Mm-hmm.
was a cat litter box.
Mm.
I swept that whole thing out with a push broom. And when I used to tell that it was a litter box, I was asked by the current manager to please quit telling that story.
But you're right. I mean,
And
even up on ACU campus, even today, there's still sort of a wildcat. Well, they're the Wildcats, but there's there we have had seasons of feral cats taking over.
well, there was a lady at the Abilene Reporter News that used to come every day and feed the cats milk and bread every morning, which is milk's bad for cats, in case you didn't know. But a wild animal will reproduce as to its food source.
Mm-hmm.
And people begged her to quit feeding them, and she would not do it.
Mm.
So, of course, the Drake, as it was at the time, was taken over by them, and the Cypress building was vacant.
Mm.
And so they used both of them, the basement
Mm-hmm.
of the Drake and the Cypress building, both.
Mm.
They just had their free will there, you know. So it was pretty rank.
Mm.
And they had used the Grace at that time for haunted different Halloween. They would use it for a haunted house, and there was all sorts of demolition
Mm-hmm.
where they had looked to do because they had put in fake ceilings and
Mm.
all sorts of things in the Grace to. They were trying to do the investigative district demolition. I'll get to it in a minute. In that building, and so there was just beams and ceiling and everything all over the floor when we were taking people through. And I'd say, Frank, you can't take people through. Somebody's going to get hurt. And he'd say, well, Donna. But we made it through somehow. Had a wonderful board that really worked hard to make it happen.
Mm.
Without a paid employee, we muscled through.
That's so impressive.
Yeah.
That's so impressive. So another project that I think you're a little bit famous for in town is the crepe myrtle project, and I'm a huge fan of crepe myrtles. I have some. Next time you drive in front of my house, you can see them. They're really starting to look stately now.
Oh, okay.
But tell me about the crepe myrtle project.
Okay. The mayor at that time was Gary McCaleb, and he came by my office because I worked for Clean and Proud, which was the forerunner to Keep Abilene Beautiful. And he said, I want to be the crepe myrtle capital of Texas. I said, Mayor, I'm a one-man office. I work with volunteers. I don't see that happening. So Janet Arduino and I went to a Keep Texas Beautiful conference. And while we're at the conference, Ada, Oklahoma representatives from their town told about them giving away 5,000 daffodil bulbs. And we said, oh, okay. So Janet and I discussed it on the way home. Well, Ada, Oklahoma, for crying out loud, could give away 5,000 bulbs. We could sell 10. So we went to the garden club and asked if they wanted to participate. And so we ordered 10,000 King Alfred daffodil bulbs. We sold 10. So we ordered 10,000 more. We sold those. So then we ordered 5,000 more, and we are at a nonprofit showcase at Hardin Simmons, and Janet passes out. Now, she already had a pacemaker, and one of the students came over and resuscitated her. They came and got her, took her to the hospital, and she got a defibrillator. So after that, she said that she could honestly say that she was a Church of Christ that was saved by a Baptist. So with that success under our belt, we thought, okay, I bet we could take on the crepe myrtles. But I had to get a new person in charge because I tried to kill the last one. So Cindy Moore stepped up to the plate. Her idea was that we would order 5,000
trees.
And I'm like, Cindy, I was thinking about one. We're a poor nonprofit. So we came to a decision that we'd order 3,000 crepe myrtles. And we wouldn't just sell them for cost like we did the daffodil bulbs. We'd round it to the next dollar. So we came out, and I started calling the electric media and the print media and said, hey, have you heard? Myrtle's coming. No, we hadn't heard. Yeah, Myrtle's coming. So this kept up for a while. So then we came up with the billboard, and it was posted in my office for a month before it went up. And it said, now it's pink black background and a black silhouette of a woman in a hat and a dress from here all the way down to her feet. And it said, Myrtle's coming, get your bed ready. Now, individually, I could have done something with that, but I had worked 7 years to bring credibility to my organization's name. I would have done nothing to have compromised it. But one woman took exception to that. She was a billboard watcher. And the city manager called me in and said, Donna, said, some lady has called in and said, your billboard has sexual innuendo. And in my normal, reserved manner, I said, good Lord, Roy. Then I got a call from the TV station. It said, Donna, I'm sorry, but we have got to run this story. And then I got a call from the newspaper and said, Donna, I'm sorry, but we have got to run this story. AP Wire picked it up. CNN picked it up. It went across the whole state. I was in leadership Texas that year, and I started getting calls from what is going on in Abilene. Well, an international magazine in New York picked it up. We heard from almost every state in the Union. We sold 8,369 crepe myrtles and would have sold more, but all the growers ran out of crepe. It was October. Who buys crepe myrtles in October?
It's great.
Anyway, we just had to keep calling them and up in our order and up in our order. People bought them by the hundreds. People that didn't have places for them in their own yard one guy bought them in honor of his daughter that had, as a memorial for his daughter that had just died, for all his neighbors on one block. All the country clubs bought them. Schools bought them. People that didn't have place for them would buy them. That's where they came along the railroad right-of-way and all those little patches along the railroad right-of-way because people didn't have room for them but wanted to support the program.
That's great.
And so that's how it happened. The next year we had 5,000 were sold, and the next year they had 3,000. Well, I had already left because one of my board members happened to be the CEO at the rehab, and he came and he said, I want you at the rehab. And I'm like, no. I said, I like what I'm doing. I said, go get Janet. She's had a son that's gone to the rehab, and she knows about the rehab and the good work that you do. He said, no, we want you. What will it take to get you? I thought, we'll end this conversation. So I said what it'd take to get me, and he said, okay. And I'm like, what?
Oh, man.
What do I do now?
I should have doubled it.
So that's how I went to work for the rehab for a year. I promised them a year. 16 years later, I retired from there.
That's good.
So that's how the crepe myrtles came
That's
about.
how the crepe myrtles came.
And now my train, I'll tell you about my train engine at City Hall. When I was on the council, as you go up into City Hall, there's this big blank box that sits at the entryway. I call it a cat litter box. I seem to have that a lot on my brain, don't I? It's useless. It's just a void. And so I asked Robert, what do you think about putting a sculpture there on that cat litter box? And let's make it a train engine, because we wouldn't be here without the railroad. And that gives us, people stop and think. We need to give recognition to our history.
Absolutely.
And so we do have the plaque over here in Everman Park that tells about the railroad, but let's bring it to mind. It pulls us in as the storybook capital. It pulls in Everman Park. It pulls in the storybook garden, and it pulls the city into it by having that triangle. And so, as with most projects, as you go along, your plans change. And one of the donors said, yeah, I'd like to donate to the project, but I don't like it up there underneath the portico. I think it needs to be out there on the yard. So I said, well, let me think about that a little bit. Sometime this old dog, it's hard to learn new tricks, but you got to chew on the bone a while, and then, well, okay, that's got a point, but it can't be at that end of City Hall, because that's just a big 2-story building, and it looked lost there. So Robert was showing me where he thought it'd be good for it, and I'm like, and why did you choose this particular area? And he says, okay, Donna, where do you want it? I don't know why I didn't start there. And I said, well, I kind of wondered that myself. But anyway, it ended up in the spot where it is. And it
Good.
is, once again, Abilene came together, did not cost the city one dime. That's private money that put it in. Now, the city did do the landscaping around it, but I think it just adds so much there on the corner where it is, and that it is a constant reminder of we are a railroad town.
We are a railroad
And
town.
whenever I got Union Pacific's money to participate, she came to town and saw what we were doing. And when I turned in the application into her, I said, we are a railroad town, and we want to continue to, declare that and give honor to that.
Yeah. Well, and I like, I was down there this morning, but I was walking downtown a few weeks ago and spent some time with that particular piece, the train engine there, because it's kind of new. I mean, it hasn't been there for too long.
No,
And just reflecting on the state of sculpture in Abilene as a sculptor myself and student of Jeff Broderick, who's done most of the casting of these pieces. I'm always impressed. Well, I'm particularly impressed with Lynn Barnett and her vision for helping as the creative doula for Abilene to become the storybook capital of Texas and now America. And the quality of the work that we have on public display is phenomenal.
absolutely.
It's museum quality bronze cast pieces that are, and I've seen the invoices for some of that, and I know how
Yeah.
much some of that costs. It's and working with bronze myself, it's not cheap.
It just keeps going up.
Um,
And that particular project, I've got to give credit to Lynn and her staff. That, I mean, all the behind the scene things that need to be done to make a project like that happen.
it takes a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jack Rentz and Becky and I raised the money, but the real people behind the project was at the Cultural Affairs.
So I hail from a little Midwestern town up in South Dakota called Sioux Falls, and one of the things and it's hard not to compare, right? You want to Abilene and Sioux Falls, a lot of easy ways to compare the two cities. Conservative, religious based, both located in the middle of nowhere. There's no nearby cities within 3 hours, which makes Abilene. We become a hub. We're a hub of education. We're a hub for healthcare. We're a hub, travel hub. We're a lot of these different things. But watching Abilene move with its art and its art awareness and putting public works out there is something I really support, because I've seen my former city continue to do that and push with sculpture walk. And like you said earlier, getting the train, it creates more of a triangulation. It's moving the sculpture out of the parks and putting it in more public spaces. And I think that that's something we should continue to support and do more of here. I would like to have a sculpture on every corner.
Well, someone made the comment about they thought now that we were really going into the bison, that we needed to really do that like so many towns did. They've done the cattle.
Yeah.
They've done pigs in one community. And I said, what a great idea. Are you going to take over and do the fundraising for that?
Yep.
And I've also had people say, oh, you need to add on to the train and get the cars on there. And I said, that is a fantastic idea, and
Yeah,
you're
you should
going to
do it.
handle that?
I support that idea. Yeah.
People always come up with these ideas, but then want you to handle
Yep.
it. Anybody can have an idea. It's the follow through
It's the
that's
follow-through.
the important
That is absolutely true.
aspect.
So as we kind of wrap up today's conversation, what else would you like to share with our audience about you or Abilene or some visions you might have for us?
Well, I tell everybody I've lived a charmed life. How else can a girl from the cotton patch in Knox County have the life I've had? And to be able to interact with the people that I've come to know and had the opportunity to not only just work with, but become friends with. And I just turned 80 this year, and that my circle of friends just keeps getting larger and larger. And I'm in several groups of people that were not in my original circle of friends, but I keep getting offered these opportunities to interact with people both locally and statewide that I marvel that I've had this kind of life. And I tell you, I was a cotton picker and cotton chopper. Now, I was well paid. Got 60 cents an hour for chopping cotton and 2 cents a pound for pulling bows. We didn't pick, we pulled. But then to hang out with some of the people, and now to even be here today.
Oh, thank you.
Why would anybody care what Donna Verhollen Albus has to say? You know, but you invited me, and I felt privileged to be here and to be able to say what a wonderful place Abilene and Texas are to live in. And once again, I lead that charmed life.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today and sharing your story and a little bit about yourself. And now that you know that we're neighbors, I'll stop by and say hi.
All
If that's
right.
okay. Well, y'all, thank you for listening today and watching. And we want to encourage any of you that want to come down and watch these podcasts as we stream them live on Thursdays, the Travi Wavi, followed by the Breakdown with Ben. Come on down. We're here at Majestic Coffee Shop next door at the Neon Parrot Live Studios. Also tune in Sunday nights where Sam live streams the singer-songwriters open mic. That's a great time and always lots of talent. Come down to that if you've got some original music that you'd like to share. Donna, thanks again. Thanks again. You're a gem, you're a charm, and Abilene is better because of you and your service. Thank you very much.
I like it when you lay it on thick.
Yeah,
Just keep it up.
absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're friends now, so we're going to keep that going. All right, y'all. Till next week, we've got some more fun guests coming on, and look forward to seeing you then.